Welcome to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, hosted by me, Zibby Owens. It's an award-winning podcast with over 1,900 episodes, all featuring authors of books you love and those you have yet to discover. Listen daily 5 times a week. Then go to zibbymedia.com and learn more about what the LA Times called the Zibbyverse. Zibby Media includes Zibby's Bookshop, an independent bookstore in Santa Monica, Zibby Books Publishing, Zibby Retreats, Zibby's Book Club, and more. Go check it out at zibbymedia.com and follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens. It'll take you where you need to go. Thanks for listening. Sophie Cousens is the author of Is She Really Going Out With Him? This is my Zibby's Book Club pick, by the way, for December, so get reading. Sophie Cousens worked as a TV producer in London for 12 years. She is now a full-time novelist and screenwriter who lives with her family on the island of Jersey, one of the Channel Islands. She is also the New York Times bestselling author of This Time Next Year, Just Haven't Met You Yet, Before I Do, and The Good Part. Her work has been translated into 21 languages, and her adaptation of This Time Next Year has been produced into a film. Welcome back, Sophie, to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. So delighted to have you here again for your latest book, which I am obsessed with. So tell us.
Thank you for having me on. It's such an honor. Thank you.
Okay. Tell us everything about the book. When did you come up with this idea? Tell us the plot. Tell everything. Readers have to know.
So it's called Is She Really Going Out With Him? And it is about a woman called Anna Appleby, who is a journalist, who is divorced, and she's not really feeling like she wants to put herself back out there again. She's never internet dated. And when she dabbles with it, she just hates it. But she finds herself in a position where she needs to pitch a dating column for work. Otherwise, her job's going to be on the line. So she comes up with a fresh angle, which is that she's going to let her kids choose her dates for her. Her sister sort of jokingly says, I bet your kids know you better than the online algorithms. And that's where the sort of idea is born. So she ends up kind of going on dates picked by her children. And obviously her children don't have like a huge range of people to choose from. So it ends up being the divorced dad from school gates, or, you know, the swimming coach or something. And it's really about a divorcee who is reluctant to get back into the dating pool, who finds herself dragged back in, and maybe she finds love along the way.
It is so funny, Sophie. It's funny and heartwarming, and the way you write the kids is so great. Ethan and what's the other kid's name? Jess and Ethan are so adorable, and the everyday life scenes in particular I found just so real, relatable, like what it's like balancing stress at work and the kids and involving them in everything, but not too much. And where do you draw the line? And the ex-husband, I mean, it was so on point.
I mean, this is something that I was really excited about with this book, because I think if you're writing about younger protagonists who don't have any, baggage in inverted commas, it's much simpler in a way, because you're just looking for the right person and you're looking for love and waiting for them to turn up. And I think what I loved about this book is that actually when you do have a family and you have other responsibilities and you have a lot of feelings about X, I mean, she's over him, but it's still complicated. It's not just a cut and dry, right, on with the next part of my life. So I found coming at a love story from that angle of complexity really, really interesting. Yeah, and a lot of my kind of friends and contemporaries are going through this now, and I think that I think it's really interesting.
I also found the choice of candidates for the dating quite amusing, and all the crazy situations, the fishing. Can you share a little bit more about the fishing date? Because I think that was my favorite with the hook. And, oh my God, I was laughing out loud.
Yeah, so obviously she sort of tells her children, right, you can pick dates. And it's funny, like when you ask, her daughter is 12 and her son is 7. And, when you ask them the criteria by which they might pick people, it's very different to, when she asks her colleagues at work, they're like, are you into the gym? Are you into yoga? And all these criteria that sort of the algorithms want you to know. And the kids are like, oh, you should go out with Tilly's dad at school because he hates bikes and you hate bikes. And that's the kind of beginning of, okay, right, that's a reason enough to go on a date. And also the kids get to pick where they go. They think it's really boring that their mum or adults generally just go to the pub for a drink. And how boring is that? So they decide they should go fishing. But yeah, she ends up going on a fishing date, and let's just put it to say there's like a little bit of a physical accident with the hook, which ruins any potential romance right there and then.
I also love the younger waiter from the restaurant and how they go to this party and she's so much older and waking up and trying to, put her best face forward with her kids and her ex the next morning and her colleague. I mean, it's just so funny. I don't know.
I mean, I have to say, one of my very good friends who has been divorced recently, and there's a lot of anecdotes that have happened in her life, which she tells me. And then I did have to send her the draft of this, and I was like, there's a few things in here that you might recognize. I just want to check that you're happy that they've got in my book.
Oh my gosh. Well, now that answers the question as to where all this comes from. I just love it. I also love the stress at work piece of it as well, and having to sort of keep up with the times, and that even though what you're doing is resonating, it's like not enough, right? You have to continually reinvent and keep up. And it's like, why if it's working, like, why do I have to do all this stuff differently? Like, tell me a little bit about that and the changing column and the shifting tides at work and all of that.
Yeah, so Anna is a journalist, and she's a good journalist. I think, you get that impression when you read the book, but she works hard and she knows her stuff. But there's this sort of, shift at work where there's new management coming in and they're kind of cleaning house. And there's this real pressure to sort of be more vulnerable and be more yourself and sort of put your heart on the line and share your soul. And, her new boss sort of cites it as like, the reason the next generation love TikTok is because people are, literally bearing their souls and sort of telling it how it is. And for Anna, who's sort of 38, she's not that comfortable with the idea. And she sort of thinks, can't I just do my job and be good and put the work in? And I think that's a really interesting kind of conflict, especially, I even find that a little bit in writing, especially when you're thinking about, oh, how can I promote my book? And you could do articles, and you see people do very, very personal articles about their own story and their own life and how it relates to their writing. But then you sort of slightly feel like, well, do I have to completely open my heart and my life when it's not an autobiographical book? It's got elements of me and elements of my life and what I find funny. But yeah, it's a hard balance as an author. I don't know if you find this too.
Yeah. I feel very comfortable being open, but I also I'm very aware of like where my limits are. Like, I don't write about my kids and this and that. And like, I have parts that I feel comfortable with, but you have to sort of create your own compass and sort of stick by that and not be exhibitionist in a way, right? I feel like you can tell when people are writing things almost for shock value or something, right? But you have to just write what you would tell a friend, I think.
Yes. And also I think these kind of books where you're writing about sort of relationships and love and friendship, obviously so much of that has come out of, my own experiences of those things. But equally, sometimes I think when you see writers, doing a publicity article that's all about, their anxiety or their own love life or something, and you think, would a male author be doing that necessarily? I don't know if they would. Would they be asked to say, oh, how did your relationship relate to this book that you've just written? I don't know. Maybe they wouldn't.
On the other hand, that's basically what I do with this entire podcast. It's like, I am like endlessly fascinated by the story behind the stories. So I can't say that I'm not an avid consumer of those types of essays and conversations, because
so am I. But I think I just feel like I'm not interesting enough. Like I said, I'm just saying, oh, I've written this book and I and I love it and I love the story and the characters, but I don't have a sort of, I don't have a big story behind it, or it didn't happen to me, or so maybe that's just my own feelings of inadequacy of not having the right the right background.
No, look, you have to do what you feel comfortable with. I think a lot of fiction, purely fiction authors versus people who write memoir and fiction, or I think a lot of novelists have trouble with the personal essay, with the on-demand personal essay, when that is not their genre that they feel comfortable with, right? It's like, it would be like asking like a nonfiction writer to just be like, oh, I'm going to try to help sell my book by writing a short story. You'd be like, what? That's not what I do. So
I think though that my husband reads my books at different stages of kind of, sometimes he reads first drafts, sometimes he doesn't read them till they're published, but he read this one sort of just last week and he loves it and says it's his favorite because he actually really likes the slightly older protagonist. Because he sort of said, oh no, I don't really like reading about, when you read love life of 25-year-olds, 26-year-olds, and actually writing about a 38-year-old, suddenly he was interested and it was much more relatable to him. So that was interesting.
That is interesting. Although I feel like in the good part, we got to see, even though she was sort of, psychologically young, she was inhabiting a life of someone a little bit older.
Yeah. And actually, this is slightly where that book came from because I so enjoyed writing that sort of older protagonist and that sort of, in the good part, she jumps forward from 26 to 42. And it's that, again, it's like finding your love life in amongst the chaos of your existence and all the other things you have to grapple with in your career and your kids and keeping the house working. And I enjoyed that so much. I thought, oh, let's do that. Let's do that kind of age bracket again. Yeah.
Interesting. I'm writing my second novel now, and I was reading it out loud to my husband. And in it, I had some comment like the mother is saying young lady to the protagonist. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm 47. When is my mother ever going to stop calling me young lady? And my husband is like, I think like 44 would sound better. And I'm 47. And I was like, it does sound better, doesn't it?
So you're shifting it. You're shifting it down. Just yeah.
I don't know. I guess I'm gonna go down to 45. He's like, I think 44. I'm like, I'm not doing that. Like, that's not how old I am. But anyway, I don't know. I so 38 is not, you're still on the younger end of in the middle of it.
True. And I was talking to other authors about this who write slightly older protagonists. And we were talking about kind of like where is that sweet spot where it's kind of older and more mature, but you're not kind of losing the younger readers. And I actually think it's getting older and older, which is really heartening because I think actually what people perceive as kind of old in inverted commas is really shifting all the time. And, we get older. I don't feel like an old person in my mid-40s. And hopefully that just carries on going and going.
I know. I said that to my son yesterday. He was talking about something about being old or whatever. And I was like, I don't feel old. And he's like, but that's what all old people say.
Yes, exactly. That's true. That's true. If you even ask my parents, do you feel old yet? My mum in her mid-70s would say no, middle-aged.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Well, I love that you have chosen to sort of age up your characters. And also you have such a following, right? And they're all getting, I mean, not that you don't have younger women always discovering you and all of that, but I feel like you have a beloved, devoted following who is aging along with your writing, right?
Yes, and I also think that sort of as a rom-com writer, and you're kind of looking what's funny about dating and what's funny about love. And again, like the more experiences you have and the more, it's not just my life, it's my friends and talking to them about, second marriages or still being single in your 40s and what the dating scene is like when you're still doing internet dating 30 years later. And all of that just sort of feeds in, I suppose, to the creative pot of what you're interested to write about. And also there's a degree of, if I was to write like a 22-year-old heroine now, I know my kind of cultural references and lingo. I'd just be nervous. I'd have to get like a sensitivity reader to check that it wasn't completely off point.
Oh my gosh. Well, I have to say your scene, and I won't, give anything away, but the scene between the windows was very hot. I don't know where that came from, but very interesting and awesome.
Oh, good. Well, this is another thing. Actually, this book, I would say for anyone who's read any of my other books, this is like my most like tropey book. And it's my most kind of classic rom-com, I would say, in terms of there's a lot of the main couple on the page together. And it is a little bit spicier than, it's still closed door, technically, but there is definitely a little bit more on the page than there has been in previous books. And again, I think I have come to know and love a lot of tropes through reading more romance and the kind of only one bed and enemies to lovers and all of that. And I think for me, this book was a bit of a let's chuck all of that in and have fun with it. But yeah, the scene by the window was a kind of, I think some of the sexiest moments are often sort of imagined, or there's a sort of barrier to them. Rather, it's all about the kind of, oh, how far is this going to go? Is this happening? Like that is often what makes it so hot in my mind. But yeah, everyone who's read that scene has said, oh my God, I love that scene. I don't know where it came from. It's obviously one of my fantasies.
So how and when are you writing all of your books? How are you getting it done? How are you translating the inspiration to words? And how are you doing it all?
Well, I do. So I have two children who are 8 and 6, and when they're at school, it's basically my full-time job. I'm writing, but I'm also doing screenwriting as well now because I have adapted my first book and I have also started adapting my second and third book, which is really exciting. But in terms of time, it really does sort of compete, because you've got to write a book and then screenplay, and the time frame on screenplays as well. It might happen immediately. It might get stuck in development for years. So it's really hard to prioritize kind of what to work on sometimes. And I will say that I'm a really bad procrastinator and I've got real issues with getting distracted. And sometimes I look back, maybe with rose-tinted glasses, to when I wrote This Time Next Year, and I actually had a day job and I wrote the whole thing in the evenings around, when the kids went to bed. And I imagine it was quite hard, but when I look back, it seemed like a simpler time. I don't know. It was just sort of, I had this window, once the children were at bed, I wrote then. And actually now I have the whole school day really, and a few clubs around the edges. Sometimes I am my own worst enemy because I just do get distracted and then have a mad panic in the last 3 months before it's in. But then actually I'm fueled by that panic. So I think that's like also a bad trait to have learned, where the kind of panic of a deadline is what gives you your kind of creative surges. It's not a very healthy way to live. I don't know about you, if you have that too.
Well, you're making me feel much better. No, I had a week without the kids when they were with my ex, and I was like, oh, I have all the time in the world to write. I'm going to be so productive. But it doesn't work like that. It's like when I have the kids, I know I only have from here to here to write. And so I have to do it. So somehow it's easier. I don't know.
Totally. And you fill the time you have. And I always ask authors about their sort of writing routine and what they do. And I was speaking to an author in Jersey, and he was saying his routine is sort of, he goes for a dog walk, and then he plays tennis, and then he does an hour and a half of editing, and then he, has lunch, and then he kind of has a martini and starts writing between like 4:30 and 6:30. And that's what he does. And like the discipline of and that's when he does it, and there's no distraction, and I just thought, oh God, if I could do that, I could write about 4 books a year. Mm-hmm. If I could be that sort of focused and dedicated, but Instagram is not my friend in this world.
Well, it's also hard. You can't just produce words. There's so much more associated. I mean, you have to do so much more to be a writer than just write.
Exactly. Yes. And I don't know, the writers often fall into camps of either someone who plans their novel or doesn't plan their novel. And I'm really bad at planning because for me, all the funniest things that happen in Is She Really Going Out With Him are things that just sort of, as I'm writing, I'm thinking, oh, what could be the worst thing that would happen on a date? Or, there's a scene where the character worries she has nits when she's on a date. And again, like that's just such a like mum concern that would like, all of our children have had like lice and nits, and it's just so disgusting. And like that for me, married with the idea of going on a date with someone you actually really fancy, is just like the worst situation. But again, if I'd sat down with a blank piece of paper and tried to plot out kind of every date idea that would be funny chapter by chapter, I just don't think I could. So for me, a lot of the magic is stuff that just sort of comes to me. But equally, I do think that's a harder way to write a book because it ends up having to find your way, and your first draft is almost like your plan. And sometimes it means whole chapters get dropped and not used. So I kind of wish I could be a bit more of a planner. I think it would be more efficient. But then sometimes, writing is it's not like, I don't know what an efficient job would be, but there's a kind of a je ne sais quoi that you can't put your finger on about where creativity strikes.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Wait, tell me more about the adaptations.
Yes. So this time next year is the adaptation of my first book, and has been released in the UK already. I'm hoping it's coming to the UK in the autumn, but I'm waiting to hear about distributors. But it's got an amazing cast. It's got Lucien Laviscount from Emily in Paris, Sophie Cousens from Kingsman, and they're playing Minnie and Quinn. And then it's got this also amazing secondary cast. There's a secondary cast, Golda Rochevelle from Bridgerton, and John Hannah, who's one of my personal heroes, and Monica Dolan, who's like a BAFTA award-winning actress. So it's this incredible cast. And I wrote the screenplay, and seeing it all come to life was just crazy. And I put myself in it as an extra as well. So that was my little Hitchcock moment where I pop up in a bright pink dress. And if you know what I look like, you can find me in the film.
Wow. Oh, that's so exciting. I'm so happy for you. That's just awesome. I can't wait to watch it.
And yeah, thank you. And I'm hoping as soon as there's news on kind of distributors and when it's going to be out in the US, I will post it on my Instagram. But it's also one of these things that you see from being involved in the movie process. So many books are optioned and written, and there's such a long chain of things that need to happen to get something made, and it's usually not even about necessarily the enthusiasm or the quality of the project. It's just sort of having the dominoes line up to get the director and get the funding and get the stars. And in this case, the stars aligned, and it all happened relatively quickly. So it was very exciting. But now I've really got I've got the bug of being a screenwriter. So I just want to write even more movies and do more and adapt more books and do things from scratch. And I need to clone myself.
I love that. So fun. So how often are you writing books then? Like, how often are you on a schedule? Like, does your publisher say, like, we want a book from you every X months?
Yes. So I'm writing a book a year. So I am literally finishing the proofread for this book this week and then starting another book next week.
Oh.
Yes. Which is sometimes challenging. And sometimes you just want a little time just to sort of sit with an idea and go for long walks. And also some of my books have just dropped into my head fully formed on a walk. And I'll just I remember Just Haven't Met You Yet, which is about a girl who picks up the wrong suitcase from the airport and falls in love with the contents. And that just dropped into my head. So did The Good Part. But other books just take a little bit of developing, and they evolve into something that they weren't originally, and they take a little bit longer. And again, I wish one could control the creative process a bit more easily, but the muses need to play, and you don't often know when they're going to.
Very true. Well, still, I think a book a year is just so impressive. I mean, it's like a constant, you just have to keep going. It's just amazing.
Yeah. And I do, talking about the kind of, obviously this is, mums don't have time to read. And there are things that fall down the wayside. Like, I don't read nearly as much as I would like to. I'm not a very fast reader. And I do feel like I have this huge list of books that I want to read, both in my genre and other genres. And actually, when I do get a moment to read, I remember, oh God, I love reading. And this is why I do this. And it's very nourishing as well, and kind of makes me see what I like about books and what I like about writing styles. And, and also with young children, you constantly have mum guilt that, you're missing a sports day or something because you have a deadline, or putting them in a camp over the summer. And, on one hand, I want them to see me doing what I love and having a career and working hard. But then you also feel like this is such a short period of time. And already my 8-year-old, I see her kind of becoming a teenager, kind of saying she wants to hang out with her friends. She doesn't want to hang out with me. And it's really, it's really hard to feel like you've got the perfect balance and that you're definitely nailing it. And who I don't know who is.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm like, am I missing too much? I don't know. If I could go back, would I do it differently? I don't know. The past 5 years have gone by and so fast. I don't know. Just like whoosh, gone. But
I know. And so I saw something someone said the other day that really stuck with me. It was something on Instagram. And someone said about like slowing down and like taking like joy in your life is just telling yourself like these are the good days. Like these are the good days. And like obviously, you know, bad stuff happens and who knows what's around the corner, and people have a lot of challenges in their life, but in some respects, especially with children, I really feel that like these are the good days. I think I'm going to look back and think like, oh, wasn't that nice when they just crawled into bed with you and cuddled up to you and told you stories about their cuddly animals. So I'm just really trying to hold on to it, and also working really hard and feeling the guilt. But hopefully they'll appreciate. Then they go into school and they say, my mummy's a writer, and they take my book in for their teacher, and you think, oh, that's nice. They're proud of me.
right. And also you're showing them how to do it. Like, you know, they'll have to contend with all this as well as parents, maybe, you know, when they have kids, and, you know, it's not perfect, but at least there's a model, right? At least there's I don't know.
Exactly. And my daughter is always, you know, she's already got a book that she's written, and she's like, well, can you just get it published, mummy? Because you've done loads, so it must be really easy. And trying to explain to her that it's not that easy. I can't necessarily have her book in print by the end of the week, but who knows? She might be outselling me in a few years.
I feel that way about my kids too. We're writing one thing together, and my daughter's like, well, obviously my name has to come first in this thing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, here we go. You know? Anyway.
But yes, exactly. we've got a little idea for a children's book that I would love to write with my daughter. And again, as soon as time slows down a little bit, I would love to do something like that, like a collaboration, or, you know, I've got so many ideas for all the things I could do, other genres to write, all sorts of things.
Well, at least with the collaborations, for me at least, like that falls in my kid time, not in my work time.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so that's what we can do for fun. That's not, you know, while they're at school, you know. So it's like sanctioned or something.
Win-win. Exactly.
Win-win. Oh my gosh. Okay, so last question. What advice do you have for aspiring authors? Just getting going.
My advice for aspiring authors would be just put some time aside every week that is absolutely non-negotiable. Because I think everyone is so busy. There's always something else to do. There isn't the magical time and the magical muse are not going to show up at the same time. So just, even if it's just one morning, you get up an hour before work, or even if it's like one Saturday, you block out a morning, just have something in the diary that is when you write. And not only will you get better, but you will eventually finish a draft of a short story or a book or whatever you're trying to do. And I think that discipline is also really good practice to get in your day. And also listen to podcasts. This is the amazing thing. There are so many great podcasts like this one where you hear from authors, but also just sort of technical ones on how to write and how to pitch. And, you know, when I was starting out in my 20s trying to be a writer, there wasn't any of that stuff. And you were kind of just, I didn't know anyone in publishing or how to break in. And now it's so accessible and there's so much guidance that's really amazing.
That's a great point. Okay. Amazing. Sophie, thank you. Again, I am just obsessed with your book, and your last books. You're honestly have become one of my favorite authors. And
that's so kind.
I mean it. I really love how you write in all the stories, and I'm a huge fan. I'm just a huge fan. So
thank you.
So thank you. Thanks for listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you love it, please leave a review and follow us on social at Zibby Owens and at Zibby Readers.